Most Americans probably don't think about Mali a lot, but there's been deep American diplomatic and military engagement in Mali, especially over the last decade, really over the last 20 years, but especially over the last decade. American military invested a great deal of time and effort in integrating Tuareg rebel fighters into the Malian armed forces in the 1990s, after a rebellion in the early 90s. American military invested a great deal of time and effort in training part of the Malian officer corps in more recent years, partly with the idea that they would serve as units that would be trained in counterterrorism that control the Malian border, especially with Algeria. There's something like 400,000 refugees who have been pushed into Burkina Faso, Niger, Mauritania, and Algeria by the conflict in Mali. Many of the Tuareg people, when the fighting started in 2012, actually left northern Mali for Algeria, but they weren't in UNHCR camps, and they aren't usually counted as refugees. Many other people, though, went to Burkina Faso, Niger, Mauritania, and they're put into UNHCR camps. Therefore, we have a better sense of the numbers of those people, and they number in the hundreds of thousands. There are also a great number of internally displaced people, in other words, Malians who didn't actually leave Mali but left the places where they lived. Normally, those people went south. They tried to find a place to stay with their families or their friends in cities like San, Mopti, Sévaré, Bamako. And they represent a very large displaced population who actually can't go home and are afraid to go home. Right now there's essentially a kind of a caretaker government in the south. It doesn't have enormous support. Its legitimacy is not particularly strong. It's certainly not consensual. There's a real question about whether or not Malians need to get together to write a new constitution, to create a new kind of political pact, to elaborate a new political system. But the president of Mali, the interim president, Tuareg, has announced that he hopes to hold elections by the end of July 2013. That is only a few months after the French intervention. Many people think that might be too soon to be viable. It's not at all clear how populations of the north would be able to take part in such an election. Many of the administrative records that would allow one to create a voter roll were destroyed by the jihadi fighters, but also by Tuareg separatist fighters. So holding elections is going to be an extremely difficult thing to do, but there's great internal and external political pressure on the Malian government to hold an election to recreate some kind of legitimate government.